They left their only water source and marched into the desert with absolute pride. But they didn't know that with every step, they were falling deeper into a trap. And Saladin had made sure that no one would leave alive. For 88 years, the Kingdom of Jerusalem felt permanent. They had stone castles, heavy cavalry, and the total confidence that God was personally handling their logistics. But looking back, their survival wasn't a miracle. It was a clerical error. They existed simply because the world around them was broken. You see, the Middle East wasn't a unified empire. It was a dumpster fire of rival city-states. Damascus hated Cairo. Mosul didn't trust Aleppo. Homs was actively plotting against Hama. For decades, the Crusaders sat comfortably on the coast, eating popcorn, while their enemies stabbed each other in the back. The peak of this defiance was King Baldwin IV. He was 16. He was dying of leprosy. He could barely feel his own hands. By all logic, he should have been an easy target. So when Saladin invaded in 1177 with 26,000 men, he expected a walk in the park. Instead, he walked into a meat grinder. At Montgisard, this dying teenager led a suicide charge of 500 knights and absolutely shattered Saladin's army. Saladin didn't just lose. He barely survived, fleeing into the desert on a racing camel. It was the greatest Crusader victory ever won, and Saladin's most embarrassing day at the office. But that humiliation actually saved Saladin. He learned a hard lesson that day. You cannot beat European heavy cavalry in a fair fight. They are literal tanks, made of meat and iron. So he stopped trying to be a warrior and started being a manager. He realized that to reconquer Palestine, he didn't need to outfight them on the battlefield. He needed to strangle them on the map. While the Christians mourned the eventual death of their leper king, Saladin went to work. He executed a hostile takeover of his own side. He secured Egypt's wealth. He bullied Syria into submission. He told the squabbling warlords to get in line or get out. He turned a chaotic bar fight into a disciplined army. By the time the new Christian kings looked over their walls, the fragmented world was gone. The ring of iron was complete. The kingdom hadn't been attacked again, but strategically, it was already dead. Saladin had set the board. Now, he just needed someone to make a mistake. King Guy was more than happy to sit down. To prove he was the true leader of the West, Guy decided to ignore his veteran lords and march 20,000 men away from their only water source. It was a bold strategy, assuming your plan for victory involves walking into the July sun wearing 60 pounds of iron. Usually, if you're going to spend that much time in an oven, you'd at least bring a drink. Guy? He just brought a crown and a very bad attitude. Saladin didn't even bother to charge. He just let the climate do the heavy lifting. He knew the sun was his best general. His light cavalry swarmed the Crusader line like annoying flies, shooting arrows and then vanishing back into the haze before the knights could even figure out which way to point their shields. The goal wasn't to kill them all at once. It was just to make sure that for every mile they marched, they got a little more tired and a lot more regretful. It was psychological warfare at its finest, the kind of slow, grinding misery that makes a man wonder why he ever left a perfectly good, rainy castle in France just to die in a giant sandbox. By the time they reached the hills of Hattin, the Crusaders were less of an army and more of a collective heat stroke with a side of desperation. To finish the mood, Saladin's men set the dry grass on fire, surrounding the camp in a wall of choking smoke. If the heat didn't get you, the soot would. It was a hellish 4D experience nobody asked for. The battle hadn't started yet, but the king had already run out of moves. He was sitting in the middle of a literal barbecue, realizing too late that he wasn't the guest of honor. He was the main course. When the sun came up the next morning, the battle was basically over before it even started. The Crusaders were so dried out they couldn't even spit, let alone fight off a fresh army of 30,000. They made one last run for the water, but Saladin's guys just moved in and picked them off like they were cleaning up after a long party. It wasn't a movie-style hero moment. It was just a lot of tired men in hot metal suits finally realizing they'd been beaten by a man who knew how to wait. Most folks figured Jerusalem was in for a total wipeout once Saladin showed up at the gates. But instead of breaking down the doors and making a mess, Saladin sat down and worked out a deal. He didn't hurt the civilians or wreck the holy places. He let the people pay a small fee to leave in peace, and when he saw families who were too poor to pay, he just let them walk out for free anyway. He proved you don't have to be a monster to be a winner. For a minute there, things were actually quiet. Saladin had taken the city back without turning the streets into a river of blood, which was a nice change of pace for the 12th century. He showed the world that mercy usually lasts longer than a sword does. But in this part of the world, a quiet day is just a setup for a noisy tomorrow. The question wasn't if the peace would last. It was how long it would be until the next group of kings showed up to try their luck in the sun.